distort it.
We continue to follow the developments in Moldova. The authorities of this country use the pretext of Euromaidan, the so-called Eurointegration project. They keep the policy to sever ties with Russia and with its people, and it was manifested once again when Moldovan Parliament adopted on the 13th of November in the first reading the bill denouncing Russia-Moldova intergovernmental agreement on the establishment of cultural centers. We're talking about the Russian Science and Culture Center in Chisinau, also known as the Russian House. What is the pretext? Russia might use this agreement, and I quote, as a tool to advance the distorted narratives. They use this terminology. At the same time, Moldovan deputies recognize that the systemic monitoring of the Russian House has not taken place. They use and they made this decision under the highly likely principle. During the session of the parliament, members of the ruling party, the Sandu regime's party, went as far as, well, I do not know how to say it. They accused our prominent poet, Alexander Pushkin, in imposing non-traditional relations in Bessarabia. He came to Bessarabia in the 19th century, and that's how it all started. It's not just Russophobia, it is a mania, schizophrenia, and such statements confirm the general rule. Russophobia and refusal from the Russian culture lead to the loss of common sense and to the health problems, because that is gibberish that is said in the parliament of the country. Moldovans, the citizens of Moldova, made their choice so that these people could champion the interests of citizens of this country, so that they could address urgent matters, so that they would develop laws to benefit their country. No, Pushkin is to blame for everything. That's just funny. There was a episode of our comic show regarding Pushkin, who is to blame for everything, and we used to think that it was a joke, but it was not a joke. It was a scenario for the future of many countries. Meanwhile, the officials in Chisinau continue to cleanse the political landscape of the country from unloyal forces, and the pinnacle was the kangaroo court over the head of Gagauzia Yevgenia Gutsu. It is politicized and it seeks to intimidate the dissent. Probably they will have legal proceedings against Pushkin as well. The integration of the country into Euro-Atlantic entities are in full swing. That's what they are covering with their gibberish. They cannot recognize to their own people that they sacrifice people, the citizens of Moldova, in order to have these handouts, grants, and to ensure the future of only part of the society, the political establishment. As for the rest, they will all be sacrificed. From the 26th of October to 13th of November, Moldova hosted military exercises, Peace Shield 2025, in order to assess skills of the national army in line with the NATO operational capabilities concept before their possible participation in international peacekeeping missions. What kind of an international peacekeeping mission are we talking about? The question begs itself. The citizens of Moldova ask Sandu, what kind of peacekeeping missions can NATO put on its track record? What kind of peacekeeping missions of NATO are we talking about? In Libya, for instance, there were peacekeeping efforts by NATO which split the country apart, let alone huge losses, massacre, and the tragedy that the Libyan people suffers from, let alone the repercussions for Western and Southern Europe. Thousands of Libyan refugees fled from their country via the Mediterranean to Europe. Maybe we can remember another success story for NATO and its peacekeeping missions. Maybe we're talking about the bombing of Yugoslavia that became the beacon of hope. And Sandu guides its own people to follow this example. Although Sandu has a different kind of people, Romanians, Iraq, Afghanistan, we shouldn't even begin this story. NATO has no peacekeeping missions whatsoever that could lead to peacekeeping results. They're only destructive missions of NATO. On the 11th of November, the Defense Ministry of Moldova announced it received another batch of transport vehicles from the European Peace Facility. Moldova is the second recipient of assistance through the so-called Pacifist Fund after Ukraine. Last year, EU former permanent representative bragged that the support for armed forces of Moldova by EU since 2021 reached 137 million euros. It is all happening amid the economic collapse and the collapse of social sector. Over the 5 years of the ruling party, the Moldovan inflation grew by 66%. The GDP had 0% growth, including its financial assistance. The industry has dropped by 4.2%. Agriculture has decreased by 13.5%. Probably Alexander Pushkin is also to blame for that. He once came to Bessarabia. The helplessness and incompetence of the Chisinau regime became obvious for the Western sponsors, and the red flag was the decision by the IMF to block the latest tranche, 170 million USD, due to non-compliance with fiscal policy and governance. As a result, the authorities had to take loans from France, since it has apparently no problems. Everything is so secured in France that they even steal from the Louvre at daylight. And clearly, this is a failed policy of the budget policy. We regret to state that under the current leadership, Moldova is turning into the territory of poverty and lawlessness, and the people see that, and they vote with their foot by immigrating in more promising countries, including Russia. There were a lot of questions that we have already commented upon. Let me repeat it once again. On the 19th of November, the Foreign Ministry of Poland announced us that the Consul General of Russia in Gdansk shall stop its operation. Previously, in November 2024 and June 2025, Russian Consulate General in Poznan and Krakow ceased to operate, and we believe that it is a hostile step that seeks to destabilize and destroy bilateral relations amid the caveman Russophobia in Poland. Certainly the Russian side will respond appropriately, and we will limit the Polish consular diplomatic presence in Russia. Cambodia-Thailand situation. We express concern over the recent exacerbation of the border conflict between the two countries. Hopefully, as a result of a dialogue, bilaterally, the countries would resume the implementation of the joint declaration that was signed on the 26th of October in Kuala Lumpur. We stand for addressing all disputes solely by peaceful means. Such territorial disputes are the result of the colonial policy of the West amid severe degradation in security in the Asia-Pacific. It is especially important to act within the spirit of unity and solidarity for ASEAN to overcome historical differences. Djibouti. I can say that there have been Russian Days of Culture as part of the state program to advance the Russian language abroad of the Culture Ministry of Russia, Roskoncert, Roskino, with the support of the Russian Embassy in Djibouti. We held a number of events that seek to familiarize the foreign audience with Russian cultural legacy. These Russian Culture Days took place from the 15th to 17th of November in the People's Palace of Djibouti. There were artists of the Moscow People's Choir, as well as workshops on the Russian language. The events were attended by the Prime Minister, Minister for Youth and Culture, Higher Education Minister, representatives of political circles, media, diplomatic corps, and our compatriots. And the significant part of the audience were Djibouti's school children and students. The invited officials and guests praised the high artistic professionalism of Russian artists, and these events were broadly covered in the media outlets. The successful Russian Culture Days once again confirmed the importance of this format on the African continent and our commitment to develop bilateral cooperation in culture and education. Starting with mid-September, Mali has been experiencing fuel crisis due to systemic attacks by fighters of pro-Al-Qaeda JNAIM group. We're talking about attacks on car convoys that provide fuel to the capital. We're talking about supplies from Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire. The jihadists spread fake news in order to sow mass discontent among common citizens and to mount pressure on the transitional government in Mali. Currently, the African Corps of the Russian MOD has been actively working on the ground. We have organized the checkpoints at the routes of the convoys. The fighters of terrorist groups suffer severe losses. Lately, there's been a decrease in this fuel crisis in Mali. Russia intends to further provide assistance to the friendly people of Mali when it comes to overcoming their hurdles so that they would ensure their independent, sustainable development. A lot has been said about that. But actually, our country pays special attention to that. You know, on the 20th of November, we mark the 18 years since the start of the work of the international military trials in Nuremberg. It is an unparalleled judicial process that condemned the main military criminals of the Third Reich. The rulings of the trial made a significant contribution formalizing legally the outcome of World War II. It recognized as a crime the hate ideology and the Nazi practice, and this ruling cannot be appealed neither from legal or from political standpoint. The role of Nuremberg cannot be overestimated. The trial, its charter, and the ruling became the stepping point to shape the norms of the international criminal law. Our country was at the origins of the trial. The Soviet Union was the first to shape the concept of the international process against Nazi criminals, and from day one of the war, it shaped standards for a just proceedings. It is universally recognized that the crimes of Nazi do not have the expiry date, and unfortunately, for several years, we have been witnessing unscrupulous attempts to rewrite history, to put into oblivion the lessons of Nuremberg, to mar the actions of the USSR and the Red Army. And Europe is breeding neo-Nazi movements sweepingly, building upon this framework. There were countries that were liberated by the Red Army from this complete inhumane destruction by fascists and Nazis. Previously, there were monuments to honor heroes, and currently they demolished these monuments, and these memorials are replaced by monuments to honor representatives of ideology of racial supremacy. There are former SS members' marches, and the most radical forms take place in Ukraine and in the Baltic states. As you might know, the Russian Foreign Ministry repeatedly calls not to forget the lessons of the past. You should realize that rewriting history and the complicity to neo-Nazis inevitably can lead to mounting threat of repeating the greatest strategy of the 20th century. To mark the 80th anniversary of the trial, Exhibition Hall Manege is hosting the International Forum Nuremberg 80 years. Foreign Minister Lavrov sent a video address. Tomorrow, the 21st of November, there will be a sectoral session within this forum. It is dedicated to the international, legal and diplomatic dimension of the Nuremberg trials, the role in shaping of post-war world order, the importance of preserving historical truth and confronting attempts to falsify history. That is the reason why I postponed the briefing, because I've just come from the Manege exhibition hall and I participated in the session on the media coverage of the Nuremberg trials. We're talking about this huge exhibition in the Manege hall. Can you believe it? We have recreated the hall where the Nuremberg trial took place, with the flags of the countries of the anti-Hitler coalition that served justice on behalf of the people of the world. And there were benches where criminals were sitting. There were places for secretaries, for those who took notes. And there are live stories and witness accounts of those who spent a lot of days and years studying this case. Scientists, academics came, as well as children of those who participated in the trials, who covered the work of the Nuremberg trials. I have no doubt that the materials of these 2 days of the conference will be part of an interactive exhibition on the internet, and that they would be accessible to the broadest audience. That is something truly grand, and it is decent for the memory of those who served justice over Nazism and fascism on behalf of the people and countries. Today, on the 20th of November, the BRICS Municipalities Forum takes place. Over the past years, the forum has gained credibility. The platform is an efficient tool to strengthen partnership in implementing joint projects at the regional and municipal levels. The event was praised by the BRICS Summit Declaration in 2020 and in 2024. According to organizers, this year the forum will bring together 5,000 participants from 76 countries, including 700 speakers, including heads of cities, experts, and business communities. The program includes 10 sections. Namely, participants will discuss the artificial intelligence, digital transformation, neural networks, industrial technologies of the future, science, education, logistics, cultural exchange, tourism. They will focus on investment projects presentation. The discussions will focus on improving living standards, providing sustainable cities development, as well as building humanitarian contacts.
The outcome of this event will be practical decisions aimed at new